Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining us here virtually at the Pérez Art Museum Miami. My name is María Ortiz, curator at PAMM. Tonight, we're hosting PAMM's live studio visits with artist Johanne Rahaman. Our live studio visit program is presented with the generous support of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and features local artists sharing their practice through virtual studio visits with PAM curators. Before I introduce Johan, I would like to thank the incredible PAM team that makes this studio visits possible. Thank you to our cultural team led by René Morales and including Jennifer Ignacio, Maritza Lacayo, and Iberia Perez. In this virtual program, we dive deep with artists in conversation in which we learn more about their practice and their work. And we have presented some of the most exciting artists living in our community. Thank you to Anita Braham and Jennifer Ignacio for organizing the logistics behind these events. And thank you to our amazing AV team, Denise Fatsas and Andrew Bird. I would also like to mention the upcoming studio visits for you to mark your calendars. On March 11th, Jennifer Ignacio will be doing a live studio visit with Adrian Rose Gionta, followed on April 18th by artist Clara Varas in conversation with Maritza Lacayo. And on April 22nd, we have artist Edison Peñafiel with René Morales. My deepest gratitude goes to every artist that accepted to embark in this journey with us. Thank you. This evening, we're joined by Johanne Rahaman. She's a Trinidadian-born, Miami-based documentary photographer, working in both film and digital formats since 2002, and founder of the ongoing documentary project, Black, a living archive that examines shifting urban and rural spaces occupied by the Black communities throughout Florida. Compelled by the lack of nuance in the media, Rahaman started documenting these communities in Florida that mirror her hometown, the Laventille Hills of Trinidad, offering a snapshot of everyday moments. To date, she has covered over 40 communities from Key West to Jacksonville since 2014. Rahaman's work has appeared in several media outlets, including the New Yorker Magazine, Vogue, National Geographic, Hyperallergic, Slate, Jezebel, The Huntington Post, Quartz Africa, Fusion Network, Miami New Times, Orlando Weekly, and on. It has been on in WRLIN in Miami and WMFE Orlando. She has been published in Oxford American, Photo District News, Bloomberg, Business Week, and MFON, Women's Photographer of the African Diaspora. Rahaman has exhibited in group and solo exhibitions in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Malaysia, Switzerland, and currently in the US Embassy of Kigali, Rwanda. Rahaman is a 2018 Ellis awardee and a 2017 Knight Arts grantee. She's been nominated to the British Journal of Photography Ones to Watch, World Press Photo 6x6 Global Talent Program, and PDM 30. If you value this program and other programs presented by the museum, please consider donating and supporting us at pam.org/donate. And without further ado, please welcome and give an award. Welcome to Johanne Rahaman.
Hello, hi, Maria Elena. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start by perhaps asking you to share a little bit about your background.
Okay, so I was born in Trinidad, in the Laventille Hills. And well, this is an image of a very small section of my family. Some of my siblings and my nieces and nephews and their children. And I grew up in Laventille, a Black mother and Black Catholic mother and an Indian Muslim father, and just kind of had this idyllic life of running around Laventille and the environs, and but I gradually you get seduced by this idea of the grass being green on the other side as you get older. from watching American TV and everything. So America has always been like the ideal thing to just, to leave and come here. And, this is, the streets that I ran around growing up. This is one of my nephews. And so I was here, I came to America and stayed in, I stayed here for about 17 years before I was able to travel back home. And when I finally did, I was caught in this place between loving Trinidad and missing it. But, America is now home. And so I've just, I've found ways to deal with that homesickness. Like I'm always homesick for Trinidad, but I'm homesick for the place that doesn't exist anymore, right? Because it existed in my childhood. And everything that you see here in these photographs with my family and my homeland, it all informed the work that I do in my project, Black Florida. I the same dignity in which I photographed my family and the people and the place where I grew up. I use that same type of dignity and to hold people in my lens in Florida or wherever I photograph. So
Yeah.
I found sorry, go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
So I found that it was really the easiest way for me to, or the best way for me to connect with home while not being at home was to travel to places that reminded me of where I grew up, and that started with going into Liberty City and just walking around and driving around and stopping at places. Before I really started photographing it, I would just as a project, I was just more like an observer. I was a voyeur in some ways, and I noticed that the same way that the same manner in which the media treats the Laventille Hills, that it's the same manner in which they treat places like Liberty City. So I started looking at it differently and seeing it more and more like home and this place that's stigmatized, but it's it's community, it's family, it's something different to outsider eyes, but it's something completely it's home for people who live there. So I try to use my my lens to bridge that space between home, which is Miami, and homeland, which is Trinidad.
Yeah, they say that, or I was told once that when you immigrate, the longer you stay in the US or wherever you're going, the harder it is to go back. And I totally sympathize with the home. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, becomes this utopia that you always kind of want to go back to it. And there's a lot of sense of nostalgia in that too.
Yeah.
So that certainly resonates with what you just said. Before I continue, I do want to remind our audience of something that I not said, which is that if you have any questions or comments, please do them on the Q&A section, and I'll be looking them through as we go through the conversation. So don't be shy. Now, I wanted to ask you, you said that you started as a voyeur almost, right? So how do you navigate, you started as a documentary photographer, correct? So how do you navigate between that aspect of your practice and then the art world, right? Part of your practice.
Well, I'm an accidental artist. I never chose the art world. I never, I didn't even think that I would belong here or find a place here, but the arts community in Miami has, and even beyond Miami, has sort of embraced my work and created space for it. I'm still a documentary photographer. My work is very much concerned with recording what is, but I've been forced into expanding the way I look at the work and the way I create work, and finding ways to kind of step into that zone of art where I never thought that I would ever be. And that started off with commissioner. That was a major challenge for me. I just thought there's no way I could do this. Like,
how so? Like, what was the challenge, or was the the
challenge
negotiation? And now we're seeing images of the archive, correct? Just to make sure.
This is one of the first images I took in Liberty City, on 79th Street. That very busy corner of 79th and 17th Avenue. 22nd Avenue, where I actually took back one of my LED shows that I did. I took it right back to that corner, right where he's standing. So yeah, it was a challenge with commissioner because I had to think beyond. I had to think outside of being a documentary photographer, and I don't treat my work in a transactional way, because I'm dealing with people's stories, right? And with communities that have often had stories plucked from them and monetized. So I had to really think about how I could do this and not feel like I'm exploiting. And so I used images like street photography that I did in Miami Carnival and Goombay Festival, and images from Trinidad. So that's how I was able to do it without exploiting anything from these personal histories of the Black Florida Project.
I want to mention, and now that we're looking the images, one of our audience member, Terry Baker, said, "How noble of you to showcase the best of both worlds." And I think it speaks to also the dignity that shows in your photos. I was wondering about, can you share more about that negotiation that you have with the people that you take images? Because I think you also, they're more than just they're more within your practice than you can even see in the image that we're seeing in here.
Yeah, well, they're I don't see them as subjects. I don't treat them as subjects. They're collaborators. They help make the project happen. I couldn't do this if they didn't make space for me. Like this guy, Chef Shonaf, his story is really interesting. He went to prison, and then he came out and bought a fryer and some conch and flour and oil, and set up this this little business on the side of the road in Overtown, making conch. And he supported his family, supported himself like that. And eventually, one of his he has this conch salad that is on the menu at Kush restaurant, that it's named after him, after him. And he's collaborated with restaurants throughout Central Florida to help them design their conch menu. So it's I couldn't I can't make something like this happen. I can't photograph unless I get access, and someone has to give me access to their space and to their stories. And otherwise it's just a photograph, right? And
Yeah.
the reason why I have these stories and I get these backstories because people facilitate it. They don't just, they don't just let me take their photograph and move on. They actually make time. So the project is, it's also theirs.
Now, I want to ask two questions related to the image that we have right now on the screen. The first one is to follow up. It's actually from Lauren Lawrence, who she says, how have you grown to build your relationships with some of the people that you have come across? So how do you build, how do you get, for, Chef Andre to sit there for you? Another question I'll ask related to this image after that.
How do I get people to, how do I bridge the relationships? Well, the camera itself is, it's the icebreaker, right? You see me with the camera and why, why I'm in your town or in your city. And then people start talking to me. I talk to them. I talk to everyone. Even if I'm not photographing, when I walk through the streets, I say hi to, almost, that's the way it's done in Trinidad. You say good morning to every person you pass by in the street. It can seem like that's something exhausting, but it's kind of like second nature for me. So I talk to everyone, and sometimes people start asking me about the camera and what I'm doing, and sometimes they are the people I photograph, and sometimes they are the people who take me to people that I should photograph. So either way, they initiate the conversation most of the time, and like this photograph, this was created in one of one of my friends. We became friends around this period. She lives about a couple houses away from this family, and she kept telling me, you need to come to Pleasant City and photograph my neighborhood. And and she told me about the rich history of Pleasant City. And so I went there, and after being at her place for a little bit, I started walking around the neighborhood, and I met this woman, Shamika, just doing hair. And Saturday morning, I just hung out with them. Then the children took my camera. They took a bunch of pictures, and I actually featured their work when I after the day after, I featured the images they took on social media. So it just happens. Nothing is planned unless somebody reaches out to me and tells me, you need to come to my town. Like I've had a few people do that, where they invite me to come to, like one guy, Omar, invited me to Fort Pierce. And he just sent me a message on Facebook, and I went to Fort Pierce, and he and his mother jumped in my car and kind of just showed me around and told me everything about who I should photograph. And they took me to a woman who I never thought I would become that close to someone, Miss Mary, which you'd see her image later on. And I've found out about her through them. She reminded me of my mother. She didn't look like my mother, but she reminded me of my mother, her quietness. Like she would just sit quietly on the porch. And I would just go, and sometimes I would drive to Fort Pierce just to sit next to her. And I probably have about 3 or 4 photographs of her, but I just liked going there and sitting with her. And, so I photographed her from, I've had maybe about 4 or 5 photographs, but I photographed her at her house. I photographed her when she ended up in a nursing home. And then I photographed her funeral. And this was a really, really short period, but, you know, and this is like, I think this is my most known photograph.
Oh, then tell us about it since we have it on screen.
This was featured in National Geographic, in Vogue, everywhere. Everyone loves this photograph, and you could see why. And this is a family that you know, I photographed them a couple of weeks before. This in downtown West Palm. And then I went back this week. I was looking for the mom to chat with her, and the kids were outside just running around and he was wrangling this dog to get the dog back in the house. And this photograph just sort of happened. I didn't know I had this photograph until I started going through my images, but it's actually definitely one of my favorites.
I really enjoy the way you describe the relationship with the people you photograph, because it's very intimate, you know, and that intimacy shows. I think that's how you can capture those very serendipitous moments of human emotion that your work shows. Now, you mentioned a lot of different communities in Florida, and Melissa Hunter asks, is there a community in rural Florida that you haven't explored yet and want to visit?
I would say Arcadia. There's a young woman who grew up in Arcadia, and she's been asking me for a long time to come to Arcadia, and she's offered to put me up in a hotel there. You know, I photographed her in Pompano Beach, but her family is from there, and there's a really, like, there's a lot of light based on everything she's described, a lot of light in Arcadia, but there's also darkness. And she's been trying to get me. I think she probably gave up by now, because I haven't made it to the west coast of Florida yet. I've mainly just hugged the coast, the East Coast, the railroad, the Florida East Coast Railroad, for everything that I've been working on. So yeah, I would say Arcadia, which is, it's not too far west, but it's about 2 hours from here, I think, or 2.5 hours. I think that's where, and rural, the Panhandle, anywhere in the Panhandle. I just, it'll take some, I'd have to take some like really long weekends and make my way over to those places to get to the rural spaces that I want to be in.
I wanted to ask you two questions. One is, now that we've been talking about the communities that you have visited, has there anything in your travels that has surprised you or amazed you when you kind of go through different Black communities of Florida? Because, they're all so different. And then my second question was that, you also see this, like, I mean, I'm just wondering how, if, I know that you said to me that you consider this images like works of art. So I wanted you to also kind of go on that, talk to us about us a little bit as well.
Okay, so amaze me. If we go back one photograph, I'll tell you a story. So the woman in the photograph before, she's deceased now. She told me this story while I was sitting on her couch about being able to, she lives in Palatka, and Palatka is like, it's a really problematic place for the Black community. It's like in the middle of white supremacists. And she was able to, on 2 occasions, for both of Obama's, for both times that he ran for president, she was able to register, to convert registered Republicans to to registered Democrats to vote for Obama.
Wow. How
And
did she do that?
she did it. I don't know how she did it, but she did. And she was very proud of it. And she had all these cards from the Obamas thanking her. And she also submitted one of her recipes to them. And there was a card from them. And she's been, you know, and when I met her, I was looking for her. And then I found her. She was driving into, because her nephew told me to go photograph her. And when I tracked her down and found her, and she was going into the corner store to buy the lotto and some milk, and she sent me in to do the errands for her. So I went and bought her lotto and her milk, and then met her at the house, and you know, yeah. So she was a spitfire. And then the woman right after her, her grandfather was in the photograph right after. Her grandfather was the leader of a jazz band out of Palatka. I just didn't even know that Palatka was this place where, you know, was part of the Chitlin circuit in Florida, and had this vibrant jazz scene. And I learned that from this woman, Miss Connie. Her grandfather was friends with Louis Armstrong, and several others. So these are the things that surprise me, that all these beautiful hidden stories that we never hear about, because Florida is never positioned as with Blackness. You know, it's never considered a place where Blackness thrives and is so abundant. So
yeah, and to me, like, how your photographs enrich our story, to me that's like perhaps one of the most beautiful things that they create. Before we go into the work of art,
Key West to Fort Pierce, that's him.
Oh,
yeah.
Before we go into that question that I asked you, I think that George Fishman here is asking something that could be relevant to some of the images that we just saw, which is sometimes it's very clear that your subjects are posing for you. Other times you're more of a fly on the wall. Do you make a choice between those stances, or you just flow with the dynamics in the moment?
I wouldn't say that they're posing for me at all. They're never like, this is my lady, Miss Mary. She wasn't posing at all. She's, you know, they're just doing their thing, and I'm talking with them and photographing them. And if I capture something that seems posed, it's not really, it's, you know, it's more like conversation happening, and you know, they're really expressive. So no, you know, what's the rest of his question?
That's how do you make that choice? Like it says, I'll read it again. Sometimes it's very clear that subjects are posing for you. Other times you're more of a fly on the wall. Do you make a choice between those stances, or just flow with the dynamics in the moment? So I guess, are you in the moment when you photograph?
Yeah, I am in the moment, always. Yeah.
Okay. And now I guess I was wondering, because I know you've said to me, these are not works of art. Can you like share what do you mean by that for me, I guess?
So because it's not posed, it's if it's art, then these are live people, you know, and live stories, and they're not they're not subjects. They're not something that none of this I created. You know, I happen to capture a moment of their life, and that can never be, you know, it can never be art. I'm lucky to be able to be there and to document it, but I didn't create it? You know what I mean? How could you create something that someone is just living? So, you know, I'm working on a project right now, which I can't talk about, where I have to actually, you know, it is art because, you know, it's an agreement between the person I'm photographing and me, that this is what I want and this is what I want you to do, and that is art. But documentation, people's lives, you know, this is, you know, it can never, for me, it's not art.
So I guess that you're also speaking about where is it consumed, you know, like when, I guess from what I'm hearing is also like, you know, if it's for the gallery or the museum or these venues that consume art in a particular way, that's perhaps not what you're thinking about when you're taking images of the people here.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not, yeah.
Now, to change the conversation a bit, Anu Mitra asked, does Johanne delve into her Indian Muslim background? This intersectionality in her life makes it so much more complex and complicated.
If
And we
I
saw
delve
an image,
into,
yeah, into your Indian and or Muslim background, and we did saw an image of like a Muslim gathering, correct?
not really, because, you know, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Catholic, you know, my father was Indian, my mother was Black, but I walked through the world as a Black woman, you know, I experienced everything, my life as a Black woman. Yeah, you know, my father's, you know, that is his identity and it's clear, but my identity for me is much, you know, I'm a Black woman. Uh, but I'm also an atheist, so I don't I respect and I love religion and religious practice, but I don't I've never been I used to be religious and I used to be spiritual and all these things, and now I just you know, I just am.
Now, the image that we're seeing here right now, that is from a public art project, right? I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about this project and also how was the images received in kind of public space?
Yeah, so these, I think also a couple images back, these are from, these were, these are like for about 2 years I spent taking, you know, because thanks to a grant, this woman is seeing a photograph of herself. And I took I created these LED shows to take back to the communities. And this woman was, I photographed her for a show in Pompano, and she didn't come to the show at all. So a year later, a year and a half later, when the Knight Foundation funded these traveling LED shows, I took the shows through the communities where I photographed and pulled up on her doorstep and called her out, and she brought us a chair, sat there, and she looked at the entire show of, you know, all the images, and then she saw herself. So this is a documentation of, you know, of that moment. And so this took a lot of my time for about 2 years, but it was, you know, it was really extremely important to be able to take the work back to the people who helped create it, and take it in the same manner in which I created. Like, I go to your doorstep, so I bring the work to your doorstep instead of asking you to come to a space somewhere, you know, miles away from where you live to see something that was created right on your doorstep.
And how did she react?
She loved it. She was really, I mean, yeah, she was excited to see herself, as you can see. Like, yeah, I really enjoyed that moment.
Now, I was also wondering, you know, you portray daily Black life in Florida. Like, why do you think it's important to focus on the individual within its community?
Because Florida is often positioned as anything but Black. It's positioned as the gateway to the Americas, as the gateway to Latin America, as a party town, a spot for the fashion industry, Orlando, but never Black. So it's vital for me to counteract that erasure with my work, and it's where I live, so it's also my doorstep, and I like photographing in the place where I live and I understand, and I've been here for a total of 22 years, I think, and 21 years in Florida. So yeah, it's yeah.
On that note, Rochelle Salnave asks, how has being a Black woman documented Black lives resonate with how you feel about your work today? And how do you sense the community feels about your work as a Black woman photographer?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. How has being a Black woman documenting Black lives resonate with how you feel about your work today? And how do you sense the community feels about your work as a Black woman photographer?
I don't know how to answer that. I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, it's representation again, right? And it's important. And I hope that I'm not the only, that all the other Black women photographers in Florida get as much attention, that their work get as much attention as mine does, so that the spotlight is not always on what I do. But it is important. I don't know. I really am not sure how to answer that question.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your process, because I remember that you once said to me when we were talking about doing the studio visits here virtually, you said, well, my studio is in my car. So can you tell us more about that?
Well, because I drive, everything I do is done from the car. I kind of, I had to rethink the studio space in the last, year, since COVID, just shut everything down. And so I've spent more time at home in this space than I ever did since I've been doing this project. And of course, I'm bouncing off the walls, but my studio is in the car. It's the place that I have the most peace, because it's not just about the destination, right? I create the work, and that's fantastic. But there's a space in between when I'm preparing to leave to go shoot for a weekend, and when I arrive and I start shooting, and all the other spaces in between for myself, which is in the car driving, listening to music, listening to audiobooks, listening to podcasts, anything that keeps my mind active, and also just helps me to sometimes forget that I am in Florida, because sometimes Florida can be a bit wearing on me. So, like these
okay.
are that I took. I in 2016 I went to Standing Rock, and I spent a week there. I rented a little SUV, and created this bed and everything, you know, in the back, and lived in the SUV for about a week on camp at Standing Rock. And these are some of the images that I created there. And I used to do that too here in Florida before, you know, before the project got funded. I would drive to some places, and a couple of times I stayed in the car. You know, sometimes I would stay in a hotel, but sometimes I would stay in my car and get up the next day, and you know, until I was able to actually stay. So staying there for a week in a car it wasn't too difficult. I had some training.
I don't think I ever done that myself, but it sounds very, very exciting. Yeah, I want to ask a question here by one of our audience member, Terrence Cripps Laurent. He asked, or they asked, what are your thoughts around digital camera shots versus film developed shots? Who do you consider putting these pictures to black and white, or is it your intent to also include color in the background as a focus? So I think there's two questions here about digital camera and film developed shots, which I think it's also a good moment for us to know what type of camera you use. And also this negotiation between black and white and color, because I do think, you know, there's a very different treatment here.
Well, I shoot digital for this project because I couldn't shoot film for this project. It's too labor intensive and too expensive, right? So it's digital, it's quick, and it's a massive project so far, and I haven't even scratched the surface of it of Florida. So everything here is done in digital. I choose black and white if it, you know, if it feels black and white to me. If I see it, if I'm looking at it in color and it feels black and white in my head, then I choose. Then I'll change it to a black and white image. But it has to it has to be that way in my head when I'm looking at it.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask you, which is related to a question that is posed here by Hope Kaser. They're asking, who is your favorite photographer and how do you think this individual inspires you? But what I wanted to ask was, you know, as you develop your career as a, you know, as a Black woman working here in the US and in the Caribbean, like, did you have specific references, like, and who were they? Because I think that sometimes, you know, looking for references is so hard when you are, I think now it's easier than before, but also thinking about the HBO documentary that just came out. So I was interested also about that other aspect of this question that Hope is asking.
Who's my favorite photographer?
Yeah, and how they inspire you to do your work.
I would say without a doubt, it's Gordon Parks. Like and not just his photography, of course, his photography. But also the backstories that, you know, I've read that he would, you know, you'd see photographs that he captured of people who were, you know, definitely living way below the poverty line, and you would, I've read, you know, stories where he would go back after and take like bags of groceries to people, and you know, to families that he photographed. Like he didn't just take from them, he didn't just photograph them, he connected with them, and he didn't just walk away from something that could have been fixed with, you know what I mean, that you could just fix with $100 or whatever. And I think he inspires me to, you know, he's a big inspiration as the photographer, the creator of his work, but also his humanity in those, you know, those places behind the scenes. So yeah, I don't think there's anyone who measures up to him.
So I want to start asking more, I want to start reading more questions from the audience. But before I do that, is there anything from where you're at right now, like work that you want to share with us?
Anything I'm working on right now?
Yeah, or like work that you are in, like surrounded by, because I see a lot of photographs in the background here, where you're at that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have all this. Okay, so a lot of the work that's behind me, I was supposed to exhibit this work. This was an exhibition that was curated last year by Dr. Jeffrey Hayes, and it's a beautiful exhibition, really, really, really spectacular. And my people should have seen it, right?
They will see it. They will
But
see it.
what we have is this entire collection of work, and I made the decision that the work goes back to the people who helped create it. So you know, this is like over close to 200 images, right? And most of it will be gone in the next maybe couple months, because I've started not just from that exhibition, but also from an exhibition I did at a solo show I did at Daring Estate 2 years ago. So some of those are already gone. Some of the really large pieces are gone back to people who are in them. But yeah, this is all this work is going to be distributed back. Like this is, I don't know if you can see.
Yeah,
This was
I can see.
right. And so when I make a trip to Palatka, I have to like get all the Palatka, the Walaka, Daytona images together and transport it all the way up there to everyone, and maybe Jacksonville, everything that's, you know.
So you're preparing for another road trip, sounds like.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing road trips to in you know, my road trips have always been about going to photograph. Now it's about taking photographs to the homes, and it's a nice way to make you know, to just help people see themselves as collectors. You know, it's their image, but it's also now you have a piece of work that you would call art.
No, and that's very important, because I think that that's something that we need to know more, do more of, like kind of, you know, that collector aspect within our communities, for sure.
Yeah, just making that the, you know, the average person a collector, and also it's a legacy. You know, it's a legacy for them. It's a possession for me, but it's a legacy and heirloom for them. And this is from Coconut Grove from 2015 at I forget the name of it. The Missionary Baptist Church. Maybe somebody in the audience will know what it is. But you know, this image, actually, I've seen a Gordon Parks image that looks kind of similar to this, and I like to feel like, you know, maybe maybe he's influenced me in some way. So
I mean, for sure. I mean, we actually just acquired Garden Parks for the museum through our Fun for Black Card. And certainly I can see that, I mean, the everyday life and everything. You know, now that you mentioned collecting, so are these editions, like you sell this work, like for anybody that's watching and is interested in
the street photography, I would consider selling anything that doesn't have a story to tell, that isn't someone's story, like the images from Gumbe festival, or from you know, Pride, or you know, Black Beach Week, you know, those images, but not the images with people that I know. Those images are going back to them.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to answer as many questions as we have with the time that we have left. I'll start with one of the first ones here, which is by Shanake Hart. She says, hi, I wanted to know that what advice does Ms. Rahaman have for anyone who wants to explore photography but does not have any formal training? She mentioned that she was an accidental artist. So I was just curious as to whether or not it's just started as a hobby or a passion for her that turned into more.
I don't have any formal training in photography. So I encourage you to use whatever you have. You know, if you have a smartphone, has a camera. It is a camera. You use what you have to create. Um, I use my phone. Sometimes I use it for recording. You know, for doing audio when I have conversations with people. I use it for taking photographs or for video sometimes. It's not, I don't use it formally for that, but you know, I use it sometimes. You know, it's you don't have to have formal training to you know, to do photography, but I took, like in the beginning when I just started off, when I first started doing photography, I didn't know what I was doing. I wouldn't even want anyone to see the pictures that I took back then. But I was taking pictures, and that was in 2002, 2003. I was shooting in film, and I went to I would drop the film off at the photo lab and at Walgreens, and I wasn't satisfied with it at all. And I didn't even know what it's supposed to look like, but I knew it was not right. And so I went to the art center. It was the art center back then. It was, you know, they had a photo lab, and I went there and I learned to print. And then, you know, I took a couple black and white printing classes, and that's when I was able to see the image come to life. I was able to, you know, develop the, you know, film and print. And it's still like, it's like Christmas when you see an image come to life in you know, solution. So, you know, if you can, you know, find a class, if you, you know, get, buy a disposable camera, whatever, use, you know, use your smartphone. If you, you know, you know, don't not attempt it because you don't have formal training, is what I'm trying to say.
I have a interesting question here by JD. He's they're asking, given National Geographic historic of exploitation of cultures guides in anthropological studies, did you have to and how did you reconcile? So did you have to reconcile, and how did you reconcile having work published by that corporation? Especially since I know you're absolutely an advocate of justice and equity and speak to that on a consistent basis through your work and via social media.
Well, I live in America that has exploited the work and the lives of every Black person. And, you know, so you know, it's National Geographic is like, is just a small fraction of that whole system of exploitation by, you know, these imperial, you know, I mean, we're still living in a time when, you know, National Geographic has apologized for that, but they continue to offend, and they continue to do problematic things with photography. But you know, if something happens, and my work was published with them through Mafun, the photo book, and I attend their seminar, the Storytellers Summit every year. And I get what I can get out of it. And I know that there are things that are problematic about the organization, but we just voted in a problematic government to replace another problematic one. You know what I mean? So
I do want to clarify that that comment was actually by Janet E. Dandridge, who said she's your homegirl.
Janet.
Yeah. So I just wanted to. So
Yeah.
I just have probably a minute for one last question, and I'll ask so many great questions to ask from, but I just want to
Janet
see.
is a friend of mine, and I'm glad that my friends don't let me off the hook.
So yeah, she said she was your homegirl. So yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess the last question is, cameras aren't always welcome in sight in Black communities. Have you ever gotten into any negative situations or altercations?
Never.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever had a problem was since I've been doing this project. The only negative experiences I've had was with white people I've met who insist on using the N-word to kind of to other people that I was photographing, to suggest a familiarity and that it was okay for them because they're friends. So that's the only issues I've ever had since I've been doing the project, and it affected me really adversely. In Trinidad, once I was with one of my sisters, and we were walking through a neighborhood. We were walking up a hill to go visit my brother. And I wanted to just photograph the way that I photographed in America. My sister and I got into a little argument because she reminded me that Trinidad is not America. That Trinidad is a lot more, it's a lot more dangerous for me to walk freely. And she reminded me also that I'm not a Trinidadian anymore. I'm an American now. So those are the altercations I've had.
I feel you. I remember one of the first times I went back from Puerto Rico after not going for like 2 years, that I was in a mall and somebody asked me, "You have like an accent," and I'm speaking Spanish. Like, are you like? It sounds like Univision, and I felt so like, really. Yeah. I just been gone for 2 years. Well, anyway, on that note, I do want to end because it's 8:01 and people have to go back to their virtual lives. Before I leave, I want to remind everybody that we do have an upcoming program on March 11th is the next one that you can come and see us. And this is the program coming up. Also, next Thursday, if you've got time, there's going to be another great program that is going to be about the Caribbean Cultural Institute, which is a project that I'm spearheading, and it has to do with our fellowship program with Caribbean artists. So if you're into that, come and see us there. And Johanne, I know you kind of went away, but if anybody wants to see your pictures and they can follow you, where can they follow you?
My everything that's current is Instagram.
And what's your handle?
At Johanne Rahaman, or just search for Black Florida. You'll find.
Thank you. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram, Contemporary Chica. So thank you, and see you on the next one.
Thank you.